Okay, so I'm coming back the next day and everything is nice and dry. But before we begin, I wanted to show you something. I'd mentioned a little bit ago that I was working on a second painting while that one was drying, and here it is. It's just a couple of koi fish, and here's what I've got so far with it. And in the next video, I'll go through this one sort of step by step. But just suffice it to say that it's going to have absolutely nothing to do with perspective. I want to transition you into working with just with watercolors and just for fun. All right, but let's begin on this one again. So, another thing that I did during the time that I was letting this dry was I drew these lines here. Remember, a lot of the art class is about seeing, right? And if you think about it, well, most buildings, especially a cabin out in the wood like this, is going to have siding on it, right? So all I did was just mark off, well, I'm going to have a board every so often. So I actually made marks for that. And then I even took these marks and I moved them over here for this to get everything nice and even, right? And it's just lined up, boom, 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 all the way back to the vanishing point. Did not take long at all, but it's all those kind of details that are really going to make a difference in your drawings, like whether or not it's just kind of okay, or whether it's like, wow, that's really good, right? And so even little things like observing, how do window frames work? What is the trim going to be like on a building? And remember, this is why I do those weekly observational drawing things, is just to get you to really, really see stuff. Okay, well, enough of that. Now, moving on, right? So everything's nice and dry, and I push down my tape everywhere just to make sure that everything's holding down good. And I even got a little rip right down here, if you can see right down here at the bottom. And you know what? If this was a finished work for the ages, I probably would have started over, right? What can you do? But since this is just a class assignment, well, I just put a piece of tape just ever so neatly over where it had ripped and move on. Okay. So speaking of moving on, what should we go with next? Well, I would say we've done everything in blue so far. So now let's start working with yellow. I think what I'm going to do is with this cabin, I'm going to make it a brown color. So the blue with the yellow is going to make green. Eventually we'll add some red into that and we'll get a brown. Plus we do have brown in our watercolors, so we can use a little bit of that as well. But right now for yellow. Okay, so I just got a little bit of water, nice clean brush, and a little bit of yellow. Now, I've chosen this smaller size brush because I don't want to necessarily get it on the trim or in the windows. Before with the blue is no big deal. A safe place to test this would be back here with this tree. Okay, to see exactly how dark that yellow was. I think that's going to be okay. And I'll just kind of blend that in. That'll be fine. But even so, I think I'll go ahead and I'm going to start back here, because this is going to be the shadow side of my house. So if it gets darker, that's okay, right? Easier to make mistakes on the darker side. Okay, now I'll go ahead and do this front side over here. The brush that I'm using is especially good for doing this kind of work. You see, it's shaped kind of like a knife blade here. See, it's not just square across, right? It's got that special sort of diagonal to it. And that makes it really great for going around corners. So I can get a nice big, fat, broad stroke like this, but I can also get right up into a little area like that, no problem. Notice how I bend the brush and curl it around. I once heard it said that if you've got enough dexterity to write your own name, then you've got enough dexterity to draw or paint. And I think on one level that's very true. But just like, if you can move around enough, I don't know, motivate yourself enough to move around, I guess you could do sports. Well, the same thing here is that, yeah, you could, but really, practicing your dexterity is not a bad thing. And with the brush, even more so than with the pencil, it's going to be about finesse. See, for instance, so I've got a choice to make. Do I go in short strokes like this? Do I try and just come up the side like that? Do I just squash the whole thing down like that to get into that area? See, those are all choices, different things that you could do with a brush, and they're all going to give you a little bit different effect. There's so much to learn with painting. You know, I kind of like that yellow. I might just leave it as a yellow building. I think that's kind of cute. We'll see. Okay, so now where's another place I could get here? Well, I think that I could definitely get underneath here. Underneath in the roof eaves, for sure. Start building up some color. I'm sure that's going to get a lot darker eventually. Definitely back here in the tree. So here, if I am not perfect with going with the outline of my tree, that's okay. But once again, if you look at the way that this brush is made, I can take and get right into all those little nuances, all the little changes in direction that I've made with my pencil. This brush can follow it. Now, for my kids in class, make sure that you take good care of the brushes, wash them out, and straighten them out too. And that way you always have nice brushes to work with. We're going to be doing this roof too and making it a nice dark brown color, I'd imagine. So a little bit of yellow in there won't hurt anything as well. And knowing that, I'll know that I don't have to be careful with that as I continue to work on my tree. Oh no, I want my sky hole. My sky window, as it were, right? That's these little guys right here where the sky can just poke through. And that really helps with making a tree look a little bit more natural, a little bit more lacy, is if you'll give it some areas where you can see all the way through. And I've heard that referred to as a sky window. I think that's a pretty good term. Okay, so you can see that I've got yellow throughout this tree. And is it done? No, it's not done. I'm not going to have a yellow tree. I'm just building up the layers, and I'll probably let that dry. Depending on the technique, I could work into it wet. But like I say, for now, I think I'll just let that dry and work over here a little bit. Okay, the hill that's furthest away, I want that to be the lightest. This one up here will be the closest one, so I want that to be the darkest. So with the watercolor, I'll start with that one, just to make sure that I've got everything working the way I want it to. And in fact, as the brush gets drier, I could basically just work back into that one, and there would be less paint on the brush. It would be lighter in color by the time I got there. Just add a little bit more water. That'll instantly make things a little bit lighter. And even a little bit more. Even a little bit more water, that is. Because I want these hills to be almost blue. Back here as they go off into the distance. Off, 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 so far away. Okay, I've dried my brush out. You could use a dry brush to erase some of the water too. See, while it's still wet, giving me just the amount of color in there that I wanted, which was not much. Okay, anywhere else that could use a little bit yellow? Maybe down in here, maybe amongst this stuff here. And we'll go kind of stronger again. Let's see how that's working. But not everywhere, and I'm not worried about getting every little bit of my stuff colored. Actually, you know what? It's going to be brown in between the little bits of low, little shrubby, little weedy stuff that you see growing out there in the mountains. So it doesn't matter if I get a little bit of yellow in there or a little bit of yellow in here. That will actually be just fine. Okay, getting the color nice and strong on this one that's the closest. And any more, maybe a little bit more on this one that's a little bit second furthest away, especially down here in the crevice, right here where it comes together. And if that color is a little bit uneven, you see how it's getting a little bit lighter towards the top here. That's good. That's sort of a happy accident. There we go. That's good enough for now. All right, well, I've kind of sat here and looked at this for a second, making an executive decision and wondering, well, do I want to leave that yellow because that is pretty cute, or do I want to make it brown? I think I'm going to go ahead and make it brown. That'll be better for you guys anyways to see how I go about making that brown. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to think, well, okay, what can I add to this? And so the color that I would add to it would be red, right? Because red and yellow is going to make an orange. And if I've got an orange, well, then I can certainly make a brown. So I've got my red right here. Now, could I go directly into the orange because I've got orange in this paint set? Yeah, I definitely could, and maybe I would. Except that I do want to show you guys a little bit about mixing color. We'll have a lot more about mixing color in some of the lessons coming up. But for now, just know that I could take that red, I could mix it with the yellow, and I'm getting a nice orange color. Okay, so I've got that spread pretty evenly, and I kind of know what to expect out of my brush and out of the paint now. There's something that I'll be teaching you as we go along, and that is, what do you really need to consider about the brush, right? And the thing to consider is this. Three things really, right? What is the color that you have on the brush? Obviously, right? What color? But then also, how much color or how much paint do you have on the brush, right? That's important. Do you have a big old gob of paint on there or just a little bit of paint on there? And where? Where is that paint on the brush? Is it at the tip of the brush? Is it at the hilt of the brush? Right? All this stuff is really important. Okay, so you see I've got a little bit of paint right there and I don't want that. Just get it. Get it right away and it might be okay. Okay. All right, good enough. Okay, so how does that work in practice, right? What does that really mean? Well, the color, well, obviously, I want to know that I've got a red on my brush because I want to mix red with the yellow and make an orange. And, I want to know how strong that red is, etc., right? But also then I want to know how much. Is my brush really wet? So it might be. And so with the nature of the watercolors, I know it's going to discharge quickly and give me a little puddle. And I'm going to use that little puddle of paint that's on the paper and use it as a reserve and then use it and spread it around. If you've been looking carefully, you'll have seen me do that. There we go. And then finally, where is it at on the brush? With the watercolors, I don't know if that's the biggest thing because, it's water, right? But that'll come into play a lot more when we're using a paint that has a much thicker body to it. Alrighty, there we go. And once again, I can wipe that brush off nice and clean, and I can erase some of that paint out of there, absorb some of it out. Okay, cool. And all right. Oh, geez, now I like my orange house. We'll see. So what's next here? Then let's see here. How about we start building up these greens for the trees and the hills back here. So I think once again with the red. You're like, oh, Mr. Coon, the red, why? That's crazy. Well, it's because not all greens are equal, right? And in my pines, I don't want a spring green, right? I want a green that is much khackier than that, right? Maybe if I was doing, I don't know, some apple tree in the springtime, I'd want a really yellowy, springy green, right? But for now, I want a sort of a darker, dirtier green. Oh, I want a darker, dirtier brown on this roof too. So I'm going to start right here. I got new paint on the brush. So what color is it? Well, it seems to be pretty strong red. And where is it at? How much is there? See, I'm gauging all that. And where did I do that at? In the safest place. Some place that I knew was going to be like really dark. So I really couldn't screw anything up there. Also, I had a big broad area to work with. So I knew if it spread around in some way, if there was too much paint on the brush, that I could handle it, and it all turned out white. See, and so I've got my little puddle right here, and I can kind of predict what it's going to be like now, and that's nice. Okay, let's start making the form on this tree a little bit. So the red will be strongest to the one side and lighter to the other as I start creating that color. Ooh, you can see it already, how this red is interacting with what is now green, and it's very different than when it was interacting with the yellow on the house. When it was interacting with the yellow on the house, it made a nice, clean orange color, you see, by comparison to what it's doing here, which is this really sort of burnt orange, burnt red, sort of khaki color, almost a brown, really, right? I'm getting all that paint over here to this right hand side. And then my brushes, you see now how much paint is on the brush, right? And I know that the paint is getting drier. So as it's getting drier, it's getting weaker. So I can probably come on over to this side a little bit more, which I want it to be lighter, and just work it over here. And as you can see, the effect is that this is a little bit redder, a little bit stronger over here, and a little bit lighter in color, a little bit more of an even brown over here. That's good. That's good for now. Okay, where else? Well, we can make the forms over here in these hills. Okay, so I've just mixed a little bit more red paint into my little puddle right here. So I don't know exactly what it's going to be. Once again, darkest area. There's the darkest area way over here. Okay, so now I know what to expect. Darkest area, and then I'll just stretch it up, and it'll get a little bit lighter as it goes up, which is just exactly what I wanted to do. Okay, so in these ones I've made it darker here at the bottom and a little bit lighter towards the top here, and I don't want it to be totally even, right? Okay, and I've taken some of the paint off my brush, or the water out of my brush. Here we go. Get a little bit more water and a little bit less paint. In other words, making it thinner. Okay, and working this area here, because I wanted to get a little bit lighter up towards the top for sure. Here, I'd put a little bit of the darker paint where it's going to be separating the hills, so it's darkest down at the bottom there. And then, with a little bit of paint that I've got here, it's a lot thinner paint, a lot more water in it, I'll start getting this guy a little bit. And I want it to be a bit lighter value than this one here. So now I've just got dipped it into the water because that's going to thin it out even a little bit more. And you can see we've got a nice gradation from darker to lighter We've got a lighter over here because we want a contrast, lighter to darker. Here too, lighter to darker. Okay, and then we've got these guys way back here. You know what? I'm going to have almost nothing on there. A little tiny bit. Just spread that a little bit. And that will be enough. Okay. And we'll come back. We're going to make those a little bit greener still. We're just setting up the darks that go underneath them. Okay, maybe a little bit in here too, right? Okay. Okay, and so here I think I want some stuff that's a little bit stronger. So I've got nice, fresh paint on the brush and very strong this time. Very strong because it's closer and I want a little bit more, detail, a little bit more texture up close. All right, cool. And let's start setting up for the shadows here. I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit of red right here. A little bit in these rocks over here. Right, maybe just mix the stuff over here and here. And cool, good enough for now.